Welcome to New Detroit's Town Hall. I'm Marshall Favors, Program Manager for New Detroit. We are a nonprofit organization that works to eliminate racism and create a more just society in metropolitan Detroit. To learn more about our mission and organization, you can visit us online at newdetroit.org. Today's show is brought to you in partnership with BridgeDetroit, a nonprofit news and engagement organization that is laser focused on uplifting the issues that Detroiters themselves identify as important to their lives. Now, today's topic is on race, law enforcement, and the criminal justice system. Now, please welcome our host, Orlando Bailey, co-host and producer of the podcast Authentically Detroit and engagement director for BridgeDetroit. Welcome, Orlando. So glad to have you.
Thank you, Marshall. I am so excited that you all are able to join us today. We are in for a treat with this discussion on race, law enforcement, and the criminal justice system. And we have two very special guests that I am excited to introduce. I actually want to read their bio so that you just know and get a sense of how amazing and qualified these two guests are to speak on this subject. So, Melanca Clark is president and CEO of the Hudson-Webber Foundation, a private foundation dedicated to improving quality of life in Detroit. The foundation's core mission areas are community and economic development, safe and just communities, the built environment, and arts and culture. As president and CEO, Clark oversees the overall operations, grant making, and administration of the foundation. Clark has demonstrated innovative and collaborative leadership while striving to build strong communities throughout her career. Prior to joining Hudson-Webber Foundation, she served in key leadership roles in the Obama, and her bio goes on and on, but I'll stop it right there. Everybody, welcome Melanca Clark. Melanca, thank you for joining us.
So glad to be here. Thanks, Orlando.
Happy to have you. And our other special guest is Darnell Blackburn, who is the CEO of Pratt LLC. Darnell has been actively involved in law enforcement for over 27 years. He started his professional law enforcement career at Michigan State University as a police officer serving a diverse student body population. He later worked as a patrol officer for the Auburn Hills Police Department. He has hands-on experience working as a community police officer, undercover narcotics detective, and investigator. He received his Bachelor of Arts degree from Michigan State University in psychology. He later continued his education at the University of Phoenix, where he received a Master of Arts degree in business administration. And for the last 16 years, he has worked for the Michigan Commission on Law Enforcement Standards, also known as MCOLES, which is a nationally recognized leader in the development of training and ethical standards for law enforcement officers. Darnell, thank you so much for joining us today and for a robust discussion. We'll try to keep it under an hour, so I'm going to do my best to moderate this discussion. Melanca, you are currently the president and CEO of Hudson-Webber, and prior to this role, you had extensive background as a lawyer and a senior policy advisor. And you went to, I heard you went to Harvard and you went to Brown, those credentials, and you worked in the Department of Justice as well under the Obama administration. Tell us about some of the various roles you served at throughout your career that is related to race and criminal, and that's related to the race and criminal justice system here in America.
Sure. No, thanks, Orlando. I guess I'll just give some highlights, but I think it's worth mentioning. So when I went to law school, I was inspired to go to law school actually because of the Brown v. Board decision, of course, that desegregated schools, and came in knowing that I wanted to work on racial justice issues, and education seemed like the obvious one at the time, and that I wanted to work with an organization called the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, which hopefully everybody knows about. But I just want to make a point. So I went to one of the top law schools in the country. I took criminal law and criminal justice for an entire year. That was sort of from one professor. This was in 99 and 2000. And I have to say, in that entire year, we never spoke about race or what was happening in this country with respect to mass incarceration. And just to set it up a bit, the idea, and wonderful professor in every other way. My point is not about him, but just that, if we weren't getting that at Harvard, like the fact, what could we sort of expect the public to know about this? what an outlier our criminal justice system is. So for example, we've got 5% of the world's population in this country, 25% of the prison population. We've had a 500% increase since the late 70s, 80s in terms of our prison population. And then when you start tracking the racial disparities, they are huge.
Yeah.
They're huge. And in my mind, we can't even talk about the system unless we're talking about race. And certainly my law school and other classes and such sort of got more educated about these issues. And so left law school and did a number of things, including certainly worked on civil rights work, but actually started, I should say, at the Legal Defense Fund, working at the intersection of economic justice and criminal justice on reentry issues. And it was, you think about civil rights organizations, that was sort of a new area because so many African Americans were impacted by this. There's no way you could focus on these issues and not talk about the justice system.
Yeah.
So had some of those roles, went on, as you said, to the Obama administration and had a number of different roles, including both at the White House and at the Justice Department. But probably the highlight of that experience was being chief of staff for the President Obama's Task Force in 21st Century Policing, which was a wonderful effort, completely responsive to what's happening right now.
Yeah, I can imagine. What were some of the things that came out of that?
Yeah, so this was an effort where President Obama tasked a set of, so this is important, a diverse group of stakeholders, so law enforcement leaders, chiefs, community activists, academics, all together, that came together to do this report. And the way they did it was to do a set of listening sessions around the country to come up with a set of recommendations on what can be done right now. This was after Ferguson and, the many Baltimore, all of the sort of really the advent of, frankly, the smartphone videoing of police and such, and then these high profile deaths that happen in the African-American community. So it was very responsive to that. And, there were a set of organizing principles, but really for the most part around officer accountability, community policing, building trust with communities, and also officer safety and wellness was a piece of it as well. A set of concrete recommendations and action plans that police departments could take, and sheriff's offices too, obviously law enforcement agencies, to set about reform. So super proud to have worked on that. And I tweeted about this, those recommendations were good then, they're still now. And this
yeah, but unfortunately we're dealing with an administration that likes to ignore things that the Obama administration left behind that can, really, really help what's happening currently. One of the things that you said that I just want to tease out, because I think it happens to us after we go to school, especially when we go to public white institutions, and that is questioning the education that we got, right? And oftentimes I find myself telling students when I speak at universities to really question if they do not have assigned readings by Black folks, by people of color, or women, why that is. You cannot tell me that Black folk don't have anything to say about all of what we're studying in college, right? And then maybe, we can help and challenge the educational institutions from within. But, I got out of school like you did and thought about it. It's like, I didn't really think to question it then. Yeah. Darnell, I want to bring you in as, a practitioner in law enforcement on the ground at Michigan State and in Auburn Hills. And now you work for MCOLES, and of course I have a brother who went to Michigan State University. There is a perception about policing in East Lansing, especially the policing of Black bodies that go to the university. Tell us about the various roles that you have held and why those roles bring you to this particular conversation today.
Thanks, Orlando. The first role I held and hold is a Black man. And I think that's the the best role to bring me to this position. You know, growing up here in the city of Detroit and growing up in the environment I grew up in, seeing and experiencing some personal hardships as most of us, and seeing the disparity caused me to want to be the change, the to change for law enforcement, to make things better. And so that was kind of the starting point that I didn't even know and realize until later on in my college career, that I wanted to be a part of that change. I thought I wanted to be a psychologist, and somewhat I still I got a degree in psychology and still work in that field, so to speak, with law enforcement. But serving as a road patrol officer and working in narcotics and working in various capacities in the community, and then ultimately coming full-time to work for MCOLES, the standard setting agency, it's just groomed me to be able to make an impact and really led me in direction to understand that there's a disparity, not just in treatment of Black folks by the police, but treatment of Black officers by the police as well. And being able to break through that roof, so to speak, to get in and be a police officer, that glass ceiling. You know, part of my goal is to bring people in that look like me, and to get them into, you know, no indictment against the city of Detroit, because we need officers there, but get them into some of these suburban agencies that they would not necessarily go and try to work in, because they don't want to be the only or the first. And so just really kind of letting people know that we need officers everywhere, and we need officers that look like the communities that they serve, and that representation needs to be all of us. You know, a great example is I live in Macomb County, and if you guys could guess how many Black female officers there are that work in the entire county. I mean, out of maybe 30, 40 police agencies, there's one Black female officer that works patrol, one. And that's a travesty. So, you know, it's this thing has shaped me working in the areas that I worked in, and working, being one of the few or only, has kind of shaped me and showed me that we need to get through this point, and we need to go in these areas and integrate law enforcement agencies, because we need help everywhere.
So the journalist in me has a follow-up question for you. And that is, you talked a little bit about the disparity in treatment of Black people by police, but Black officers by police. And you sort of highlighted just how hard it is to sort of start a career or break into mostly white departments. Can you talk a little bit about what else you may mean when you say there's a disparate treatment of Black officers in police forces, police departments?
It goes, and thank you for asking. Actually, it goes in all. It's multi-directional. You know, you get the treatment from the Black community of being an Uncle Tom, you know, for choosing this profession or being in this profession, and you get the treatment from the white officers who don't talk like you, can't relate to you, can't. They may not know very many people that look like you, so they say things that are microaggressions. They say things that are out of, you know, they may not be as blatant with their lack of understanding and their bias, but they say things or do things. And then there's the fact of even getting into this profession. You know, that we have standards, and MCOLES set standards, and I'm proud of the standards we set, but there are ways around, you know, not going around the standards, but there's a lot of times people think they can't work in certain places because of their background or lack of educational experience. And so even from getting in, a lot of people just aren't aware of, they get turned down by one agency and say, well, I can't do this. And really, that's not the state standard. That may be an agency standard, or it may be a bias that agency has just shown against an individual. So those are the types of things that you know, you have to face as a law enforcement officer that make it very, very difficult on all levels to serve.
Thank you for that. I appreciate it. You know, what would be interesting too, you held up the one Black woman in all of Macomb County on patrol. What would be interesting is to hold that percentage or lack thereof up in the police departments within Macomb County versus how many Black residents there are that span throughout Macomb County, and you sort of level set there and start there. Melanca, I want to bring you in. Once again, we're having a lot of conversations right now about the criminal justice system. And there are folks that say that the criminal justice system is broken. And there are folks that say that the criminal justice system is working exactly how it was designed to work. And you lifted up a stat earlier that talked about Black bodies, Black people making up a significant majority of the prison population, with only being, 5% of the nation population. So talk about what sort of rises to the top for you when we talk about what needs to be addressed within the criminal justice system.
Sure. And it's all, of course, interrelated. When we think about the conversation that's happening because of the George Floyd incident and everything that happened subsequently, and that's still happening, that's police brutality. And I think that what we need to channel too is that this is an entire system that is brutalizing African-American communities. And so for me, this mass incarceration piece, so I gave you like that top line number, just how out of whack we are in general. When you start, looking at racial disparities in Michigan, I think we're 14% of the population. We're about half of the prison population. And when you look at long sentences in the state, we're over 60% of those serving long sentences. The implications for that, not just for the individual. So like, are we getting our money's worth in terms of more safety, more well-being in communities? I would say we are not. The implications for families that lose a father, and looking at the data on sort of the likelihood of their children then in turn being incarcerated. Obviously, not having someone there to be part of the social fabric of the family and of the community. We're literally looking at communities where at any one point, folks are just churning in and out of jail and prison. We actually, and you look at sort of so there's, I think that those disparities have made our country, because of racism, very complacent around that type of, that we're, incarcerating this many people, and that we may not be getting our money's worth. Again, in Michigan, I think since the 80s, our prison spending has gone up 250%. Our spending has decreased by 50%. So that's we're investing enormous capital into this system and not investing in our communities. And I think that's where the conversation needs to happen. And again, it's the in-incarceration people, as folks come out, their employment prospects, as you might imagine, their earning prospects, all of that is incredibly diminished by having a criminal record. But the other thing, and this has been, in a well-researched and vetted study, when you look at whites and Blacks with criminal records, they actually was a study that sent testers, white and Black, were some indication that they had a criminal record. And it showed that, all the biases that we know about in employment just for Black people are overdetermined when you have a criminal record. So if you have a criminal record, the same as what a white person would have, you are penalized more for it than you would if you were white. And in fact, the study showed that even whites with a criminal record were still doing better for callbacks for jobs than Blacks with a criminal record. So it just, the biases that we already have are sort of justified for folks that are carrying them, and then they act out on it. And when you think that 1 in 3 Black men are going to be incarcerated, and the number that have contact with the system, it's sobering. The other piece is just, the police part. You've got the brutality issue, but they're also the front door to the jails. And when you look at the jails, we just did a study in Wayne County to see the drivers of the Wayne County jail population. The largest category of admissions is around driver's license suspensions.
Like, why are we locking people up for that, really?
Precisely. It's not about public safety. That's about being poor. And
okay.
People are Black.
That.
We're allowing that to happen. And you think about, even if folks that are in there just for a couple of days, the disruption for most folks, if you have a job, if you are a single parent, are profound. You pay money for that.
Absolutely.
That's what keeps me up at night.
Yeah, and my follow up to you, Melanca, is you are the head of a foundation. You are a person that works for an institution that folks will and may see as a part of the system. How are you leveraging the resources that the foundation has to solve for this? And how are you sort of, walking and chewing gum at the same time with trying to disrupt the system, but also from the outside looking in, being seen probably as part of this system of mass oppression of Black and Latinx folks in America?
Sure. No, and I appreciate the question, Orlando. So, when we have an overarching mission of improving the quality of life in the city, but our board has signed on to a shared prosperity agenda when we launched our new strategy in 2017. And so we're being really intentional around addressing racial inequity and structural barriers to opportunity. So our safe and just portfolio, I mentioned the Vera study that we funded through Hudson-Webber funds. But also the other work that we're doing is through a collaborative called the Michigan Justice Fund. So we, with other funders, are really putting our capital behind this collaborative where right now, because the other thing that often happens with funders is that we see the problem and come in and say, well, we have all the answers and this is how it's going to be. Actually hearing from folks that are, experiencing it and practitioners that are on the ground every day.
Thank you for naming that.
Right now, yes, currently in this very deliberate process of, we have a learning cohort of practitioners who are getting some, operating support for participating in this learning journey with us, but they are informing our grant making plan, which we'll be announcing in January. And the idea is around putting resource and support around a thriving, enabling environment where we've got grassroots organizations well-resourced, and that the linkages between them and the folks that are doing the work in Lansing are very strong. But also, I came out of government and I'm in a foundation, I'm a pragmatist. And what we need to do is make sure that we've got diverse allies on these issues, that we have constituents, not just in Detroit, but folks on the west side of the state that care about this. So we're being very deliberate about those linkages too. And we, also want to use our voice as philanthropy with the power that we come and bring with it to say, we care about this. This is unacceptable.
Thank you, Melanca. Look forward to the announcement. Hopefully, you will leverage the partnership with BridgeDetroit to make that announcement. I'm going to do a shameless plug.
Indeed, nice plug.
Darnell, I want to bring you in and sort of ask the same question around how you are disrupting this well-oiled machine from within. You are a practitioner. Currently, you have worked within this system for 27 years. What do you see as a top priority in law enforcement today when we talk about change? And how are you sort of, walking with this tension of wanting to see change and disrupt the system, but also being a part of it?
I'm gonna throw something to Melanca just for a second. Your last question is not directed toward her, but just to speak in support. I can firsthand talk about, not about what's going on yet, but definitely that to understand that that Hudson-Webber Foundation, they do reach out to practitioners, and that's kind of the relationship that we're establishing, because they want to get out here and show that not just put money behind something that's just going to be useless, but they care. And so that's my plug for them, because we've actually had some communications about this thing prior to this right now. So just wanted to touch on that, so that we are, they are working toward this goal, as well as I and other organizations. So for me personally, my organization, this George Floyd, this thing that occurred is nothing new. And I say, if to answer your question, or to get to the answer to your question, to see that was so disheartening, disturbing, so angry. It made us all feel so many different emotions. And for those of us who have been fighting in the trenches for so long on this law enforcement thing, who wanted to see this improvement, now it has come to fruition, unfortunately, at the hands of something so disgusting. So, I went from frustrated and wanting to give up to being energized and empowered. And so this right now is the time for reform. I'm not a defund. I'll say it's not defunding. I think it's refunding, reallocating funds, which is what it should be called, 'cause that's what they're speaking of anyway. But it's the time for reform and reallocation. And so for me, I'm encouraged. I was very discouraged. But I'm very encouraged. And one of the things that I do and will continue to do through my company, through my personal promotion and pushing is to recruit more diversity. You heard me talk about it. And I think that these police departments need to look like the communities that they serve. And so, really getting a handle on and reaching back into these communities and saying, we need you. We need you. We need you because we need good people. We need minorities. We need people. You guys spoke of the disparity in the driver's license, the suspensions in Wayne County. And, being a product of an inner city, not growing up with too little, but not too much either, just growing up in Detroit and recognizing and understanding the plight of people, me as a black man or as a black man, understanding that people can't afford to, if they're going to work and you write them one ticket, they're going to work, they're just trying to work and they miss a stop sign or they forgot to do something or they got defective equipment. You write them one ticket, they still got to go to work. They can't pay that ticket because of their situation. Now you're piling another ticket on top of it and you're piling suspension. I know the game. I know the game. And I know that me being a police officer and stopping people with suspended license and saying, all right, you know what, you got to get this together. There is the opportunity for discretion in some matters and saying, listen, this is how the game works. And I explain to people, and I say it for lack of a better term, is the game, but this is how the race system works. I call it a race system. And so knowing and understand that race system and the way it works, having somebody that understands it and has empathy would allow them to not be in that situation. So my job is to continue holding the banner and saying that we need good police officers that look like the communities. And that's what I'm able to do more now than ever. And also the last part is training. Unconscious and input. People think that's the major piece. It's a big piece, but it's also training along with community training, community engagement with the we and not the us versus them. So doing implicit unconscious bias, de-escalation training, but not just with the cops, but bringing the community in and having the cops in the community sit in a room together and go through this training and interact and see one another and hear one another. And so those things I'm encouraged by, and those things they're happening or they're at least moving toward that direction with reform. So for me, I've gained traction in that way.
And this training piece and this interfacing with community, that will be hard and will require a lot of work. And I'm hoping that law enforcement sees it as a necessity, right? To make sure that there is fidelity in community and police relations. BridgeDetroit has been laser focused, for lack of a better phrase, talking about those things and exploring those things. We have about 10 minutes left, so I want to sort of do some rapid fire questions around some of the things that are making the news, and one being a 50-year-old young lady by the name of Grace Ford. That's what we're calling her. I don't think they've revealed her identity in Oakland County, who was placed in a detention center in May, and the Michigan judge criticized her for failing to do her schoolwork while she was on probation. And Melanca, I'm really wondering for you, even in counties where there is a majority white population, and even in Wayne counties where we see the adultification of Black youth within this system. How are you feeling about this story and the work that's being done to get Grace released?
Yeah. So no, there's a lot in the news that it is terrible, and that was a story, obviously, that I read too. And it's like, I mean, it's certainly indicative of what we know about the data that for Black youth, they're more, for the same offenses, more likely to be confined, held longer, and the rest of it. And I think I'm glad that it's getting as much attention as it is. I think that's really important. One thing, just so that it's not all, it's not all gloom and doom, but one thing to acknowledge, for Wayne County, they kind of took this issue of, not that particular issue of what judges' discretion are, but they did a lot of work around the youth detention system here in the county to get it right, and reduced recidivism by like over half. This is since 2000. And then importantly, I think, the number of youth that were confined outside of their homes was over 50%. It's now down to 11%.
Nice.
So it has been like important progress that's happened. And that's the thing, like, that's what I, for all of this stuff, not just about racial inequity in the criminal justice system, but writ large. Orlando, you started the conversation with a question just about what we're learning, or not learning in schools. And I just want to underscore that. I feel like, and this is not the only issue, but I do think that fundamentally our education system, in terms of educating folks on the structural, sort of government action that has led us to where we are across the board, not just for the justice system, but housing, segregation patterns, like, lack of access to capital, all of sort of the narrative that is America is not well understood. And so when people look out, they kind of see the results of that. And it seems, at the well-meaning folk, are like, well, that's too big and it is what it is, and kind of go on with their lives. And the truth is, it doesn't have to be this way. There were a set of intentional things that have happened that have brought us to here, and there are a set of intentional things we can do to come out of it. And that's what we have to keep laser focused on, so that it's not just a conversation. It's not a problem too big for us to handle, but that we take this stuff on, that we take it on seriously.
And be brave enough to take it on. Darnell, I see you shaking your head. What do you have to add to that? You're on mute, Darnell. There you go.
I got you. I mean, I wholeheartedly agree. And I can tell you, we do. I mean, just seeing this whole thing, speaking from the criminal justice perspective. Uh-oh, did I lose you guys?
No, we're with you.
Oh, okay. I thought I lost you. Everybody did this, and I was like, where'd they go? Uh-oh. So, no, speaking from that criminal justice perspective, I mean, or from all perspectives, even, undergrad degree in psychology. I never read or never heard of Black psychologists in my undergrad at Michigan State. And thinking about this system, there is so much in the system, but the thing is that we really need to recognize that now is the time, and this isn't the time for the faint at heart. It's the time for us to move forward and to really understand that this is barrier breaking time. And so to hear, have this panel, this forum, and to hear, this is encouraging. It's encouraging, and it's something that we have to do to continue to enlighten everybody and keep this, this has to be a mindset change, not a movement, not a feeling, but a mindset change. And that's where I think that we are as practitioners is, okay, no, this system needs to change, this entire system. And this is the starting point to changing the education system, changing the housing system. We've all been through it and experienced discrimination. And so this now is a great opportunity to make things change.
I wonder.
Go ahead.
Orlando, just on that, I just want to flag, and I want to be mindful about how I do it, because I'm not advocating for any specific legislation, but I think it would be great if everybody was tracking the fact that there are a set of bills that the Michigan Task Force on Jail and Pretrial Jail and Incarceration have put forward that were just announced last week that address some of these issues that we talked about on the jail incarceration side. And it has bipartisan support. There is a lot of momentum around it. And I just hope that everybody, maybe BridgeDetroit can just link to it, has just the information to understand what's being proposed.
Yeah.
Exciting stuff, and it's important movement that's happening in the state.
Thank you for that, Melanca. And for those of you who are viewing, call your state legislator and, you know, get the skinny on what those bills are about. We have just under 5 minutes left, and I want to touch on a hot topic that I think is really along a spectrum. Darnell, you brought up the defund the police movement. And I think, you know, your main issue with that is the semantics and the vocabulary that is being used. Admittedly, I think I share the same disdain for the language. But I want to talk about why in this time, and you know, and this can be our closing question. I know we got to keep it under. Why is having this conversation and seriously considering reimagining how we police in this country so important? Melanca, we'll start with you.
Sure. Yeah, I think that you know, we talked earlier about this investment piece.
Yeah.
That's how I think about it, right? Like if we, you know, have a set of outcomes that we want, you know, for us to feel safe in our communities and then to thrive, what is the best use of our resource? And I know, you know, the abolish the police is, and first of all, just to be clear, there are certainly advocates that are absolutely mean what they say. And then there's some folks that are putting that out there to push the conversation around reimagining public safety. I'm not in the camp that we need to, that we should abolish the police, just to be candid about that. But I do think it is tremendously exciting to have a conversation around thinking about where our investments are going and how they can be reallocated to get the ultimate outcomes that we want.
Thank you, Melanca. Darnell, I'll give you the last word.
You know, no, I couldn't resist. Sorry. I think the same. I mean, this is certainly the time for reform, as I said, and reform means refunding in various areas. And you know, police want help. The good officers do want help, and I think it's just a matter of this whole idea of, like you said, the semantics. You know, to get the support on all ends, I think we need to just be mindful of the optics of the semantics, because it makes it more difficult, and it sometimes gives people, it makes them feel empowered to fight against something that will really be a benefit to them. But otherwise, this is the time for reform, and I'm excited about it happening.
Melanca Clark, CEO of the Hudson-Webber Foundation, and Darnell Blackburn, a field representative for Michigan Commission on Law Enforcement and Standards. Thank you both so much for joining us. Of course, I had so many more questions. We could have gone in a few different directions, but you all were great sports. Thank you so much. Our thanks to New Detroit for hosting this conversation in partnership with BridgeDetroit. Thank you, Marshall, for working on this. And we, of course, want to give a shout out to and acknowledge the CEO of New Detroit, Mike Rafferty, in his absence. Until next time, folks, have a good day.